and people's paychecks are growing. And our nation is headed in the right direction thanks to his work.
Well, that's pretty much the worst person on the face of the planet. That is Gretchen Whitmer, known as Governor Ratchet on this show. I'm still sometimes it just irks me that woman got reelected handily in the state of Michigan. What are you doing, Michigan? Anyway, joining me now, Peter St. Onge of the wonderful Heritage Foundation, economist. Peter, so how great is this booming economy doing after we locked down the country and social distancing and printed trillions of dollars? And so how are we doing now, Peter?
Yeah, it's not doing as well as you might expect. The government statistics look fantastic. The finest statisticians money can buy, or tax money anyway. And, we've got the headline numbers, the ones that she's bragging about there, Governor Ratchet. Those look fantastic, right? You've got falling inflation. You've got historic lows on unemployment. You got slowing, but, still there, GDP growth. Of course, the thing is, once you dig into those numbers, every single one of those things is fake. You've got GDP is driven by $2 trillion in deficits, right? A lot of this is to buy white elephants. Remember Solyndra back during Obama, when taxpayers got fleeced? I think it was $200 million back then. Of course, the number's a lot bigger now. So the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which was Build Back Better, right? They literally just renamed it. You can see it in the congressional log. All right, so that was just a huge handout to green lobbyists. That's going to be about $1 trillion. Guarantee you there are going to be tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions, that are going to go bust, all that on the taxpayer dime. So that GDP number, that's not measuring us getting rich. That's measuring the fleecing, the raiding of the Treasury and handing it out to these rich lobbyists. You take the jobs numbers, the unemployment numbers there. We've got over about 6 to 7.5 million Americans who dropped out of the workforce around COVID. Either they were discouraged or they went on government benefits. Government benefits went up $800 billion a year during COVID, and they stayed up. Right? The pandemic is over by all accounts. Even Ratchet would agree the pandemic is over, but we are stuck with that $800 billion forever. So you drive around the cities in America and you see all these people bent over with the fentanyl or, living in their mom's basement playing Assassin's Creed, and you say, how can we have a 3.9% unemployment? I see a lot of people who don't have jobs. That's right. They're not in the labor force. They're not counted. If you are discouraged, if you've given up on life, if you're out on the street, you're not unemployed, you may as well be retired for a government statistician. And then finally, you got the inflation. Right, so inflation was coming down because the supply chain wound down, because the Fed stopped printing money hand over fist. And it did come down for a little while, but last October, it touched 1% annualized on inflation. All right, and since then, every single month it's been marching up 2, 3, 4, 5. So at this point, we're at 6.2% annualized. That's for business inflation, PPI. We're at about 4% on consumer and rising. So inflation is coming back. They got the freebie, partly from the lockdowns ending, partly from the supply chains easing, partly from the world economy slowing. That makes oil prices come down. So they got all these transitory freebies, if you will. And now, as Warren Buffett says, now the tide goes out, we see who's swimming without a suit. Now we're seeing the real durable inflation. This is looking permanent.
Yeah, well, Peter, that was all pretty much horrific because that was exactly what I thought was happening. Now, I'm going to put this in the most layman terms possible because I'm an idiot, and you just tell me if I'm wrong. What it seems to me is the people who are in charge, all the elites now, whoever they may be, however you want to classify that, they're blood-sucking the last of the money out of the Treasury. They're doing everything they possibly can to lie to the American public about what they're doing so they can sail off into the sunset with the last of our gold when we go down in flames. Do I have that about right?
You have that absolutely right. And, traditionally in America, we've had a relationship with our government where it's a parasite, but we can still get by, right? They still make sure the dishes are washed and they pay the electric bill and whatnot, right? Terrible roommate, but anyway, we can survive. What's happened since COVID is that government has turned into a predator now. All right, they're putting out these lobbyist-funded regulations, trying to wipe out entire domestic industries, just hand over to China, who cares? because once somebody goes on welfare, they are a reliable left-wing voter. They're obedient. They do what they're told, right? They want us to be, frankly, slaves. They do not want us to have businesses, to be entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are the worst thing for big government, right? Entrepreneurs care about the future of the country. They have the means to do something about it. They're independent minded. They want to convert all that into, at best, just employees of a big company. But really, what they're pushing is that everybody just goes on government benefits. And of course, these guys, they're socialists. They have no idea how the economy works. They don't understand that government doesn't actually have any money. It produces nothing. Everything government has was stolen. It was either stolen in taxes, it was stolen in inflation. They don't understand what the end game here. And of course, the end game is poverty across the entire country.
Peter, you have a video out talking about the housing market and how bad it really is. You touched on it a little bit. How bad is it? Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir for everyone out there searching for one right now, but tell us how bad it is.
Yeah, it's rough. During COVID, we had a perfect storm. So home prices soared. That was because the Fed printed so much money. Mortgage rates went up. They went from 3% to 7 to 8%. That was because the Fed tried to fix all the money it printed. And then the inflation bleeds through to everything, right? So your property taxes go up in lockstep with your home price. If you're planning to live in your house, all right, if you're not actually looking to move, if you like where you live, it's a problem when your home price goes up because that means your taxes go up now. Even if you sell your house, you bought the house for $400,000, now it's $1 million. Okay, but you got to live somewhere. And the somewhere also went up in price, right? Then you got insurance exploding, you got all these costs going up. And what you're seeing that now is that young people are giving up, right? Millennials, forget Gen Z, they're not building a future. They're not even bothering. They're doom spending. They're going on 3-day, Caribbean vacations. They have a dime to their name, right? Previous generations, they'd be building up for a down payment on the house so they could have a family. These guys now are just living for the day because the problem is they look at the way they grew up, right? They had two parents living in a house that their parents actually owned with 3 bedrooms. This is just science fiction to them. This is some movie of some bygone era. They cannot imagine how they could possibly get to that point. So for the median house in America right now, you need to make 6 figures to get qualified for a loan. That's for the median house. That is not for a glamorous house, that's median. If you're a millennial and you're cobbling together shifts down at Panera, 6 figures, that ain't gonna happen for a while. By the time that happens, you are not gonna be building a family. You're gonna be in your 30s.
God, have mercy. All right, Peter, before I let you go, what does keep me up at night for the little I really truly understand of it is the world walking away from the dollar. While I understand this is not something that's about to happen tomorrow, I'm not naive. It does seem like with what we're doing by destroying the value of it, it seems like we're accelerating that end, aren't we?
Yeah, that's one of the big debates right now. Balaji Srinivasan, who's a great voice on Twitter, he just came out with something today talking about that. Traditionally, the US government had a very strong goal to protect the value of the dollar, right? That was the so-called petrodollar. And what it's starting to look like is that the government is almost trying to sabotage the dollar. Now, there's logic to that, right? If they sabotage the dollar, then it makes it cheaper to make stuff in America. So because the government has made it so expensive to make anything here between regulations and taxes and mandates and the rest, they can try to reverse some of that damage by gutting the dollar, making the dollar really cheap. So, of course, that bankrupts us. That's throwing away our national wealth, but that's one way to hide the damage that they've done so far. So, JP Morgan just came out with a report warning about that the dollar share of international reserves, that's what central banks hold in other countries, that's collapsing. It's now 58%. It used to be in the 70s or the 80s. If you include gold in that, we're actually below half at this point. Now, where is all that money going? A lot of it is actually going into gold. So gold has absolutely exploded on central bank balance sheets. If gold were a currency, which it should be, it would be the number 2 in the world right now, just behind the dollar. So we have these big shifts moving. And if you look at what the Biden administration is doing about it, if anything, they're accelerating it. They just went to seize Russia's central bank dollars. Good fun, they're in a war, whatnot. The problem is that put every country on earth on notice that the dollar is a politically risky thing to own. So all these countries, Indonesia, Brazil, countries that don't have a beef with us, they're getting off the dollar now, because you never know when some activist is going to get pissed off at your LGBT policies and you're going to have trouble with the Biden administration. He's already done that in Africa. He's threatened sanctions against Uganda for their laws to do with LGBT. Uganda is a conservative place. Anyway, if you look at what the administration is actually doing, for the first time, I think in my lifetime, they are not trying to protect the dollar. It almost looks like they are trying to gut it on purpose.